All right, Mike, how you doing? It's like a law firm. Mike and Mike Law Firm. Are we hot live? Are we on? Are we about ready? You're right. You ready? All right, it's 4:30 and it's time to start this meeting, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. First of all, thank you all for being here as we go through this final housing needs assessment. This process started a long time ago and took us a while to get here, but it's now finally for us to actually be able to show the public, some needs of this community and hopefully get some direction is where we need to go from there. Well, that being said, I'm going to ask Candace Whitehouse to come up here and she will start and introduce our guests, and she's the director of our affordable housing and homeless prevention. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. We've got a great crowd tonight, so that's exciting. Thank you for being supportive of this project through funding and time and energy. This housing needs assessment will be a foundational document for this office. When I began in this position and started researching communities that were successfully working on affordable housing and looking at their unhoused populations, the common thread of the success was communities who started off with an assessment, who really dug into what's going on right now and where we are. These housing needs assessments are meant to be a tool and a method to begin our hard work with focus and data rather than assumptions or personal thoughts. So not only will this document benefit the Office of Affordable Housing and Homelessness Prevention, but the community as a whole. Nonprofits, human services, civil groups, individuals wanting to make a difference can use this data in their strategic planning, grant writing, and goal setting. I want to thank our community for all the work that they've done. Georgetown Scott County has shown up for in-person meetings and also answered the call for surveys multiple times throughout this process. The goal number that we were given for surveys, we majorly surpassed it because of the generosity of all of our citizens. I want to thank RKG, Summer, and Russell for all the hard work they've done to make this project successful. Throughout the process, they've taken lots of feedback from us and opinions and continue to improve the product that we have today. I feel like what we are presenting today is a high-quality product that we can be proud of. We didn't rush through it. We worked really hard to get to where we are today. And so with that being said, I will turn it over to Summer and Russell.
Well, thank you all for showing out tonight. This is a big deal for us and you. You all have been at this for a while. And I know I don't get too many single-purpose meetings, and I know you all don't get too many, so we're going to get focused on what this all means. We've presented versions of this presentation at various times in the process. A lot of data. We've stripped it all away. Most of it's gone. We're going to focus in on the implications of what we learned through that process. I'm going to start this off by introducing Summer Pan, who's my senior project manager. She's going to bring you through the implications of the data, and then we're going to jump right into what all this means and what does it mean for implementation. And you all right now determine the outcome of this plan. Whether you want to be a facilitator, someone who initiates and brings in others to the solutions, or do you want to be more engaged as a partner in the middle of development deals? So as you're hearing the presentation, think about what that role should be for both the city and county government. Summer?
Good afternoon, dear magistrate and city council members, dear mayor, staff, and the public. It's an honor to be here to present to you the findings from our housing needs assessment. So like Ross mentioned, we'll go over some high-level data analysis implications and then overview, okay, what does it mean for us in terms of housing needs? And then what does it mean for implementation? And we're going to look at strategic actions and what does it take, how long it takes to implement some of the strategies. Next, please. So first off, what does it mean after all the data analysis? What are some key takeaways? Next. First, we're going to look at demographics and economics. So The number one takeaway is that housing demand will continue to increase into the future, at least by 2050, because Scott County is projected to experience very strong population growth into the future. And right now, we have proportionally more family households, and the future population growth is mostly will be driven by homeowners and two groups of people, older people and also younger people. What it means is that there will be rising housing demand for ownership homes in general, and then also senior housing and housing solutions for young professionals. The growth in young people 18 to 34 years old is a very positive trend for the economy. However, the focus for the county and city should be that we need to help them with housing solutions because many of them tend to be renters and they have aspirations for future home ownership. The county and city really outperformed the state and the region in terms of education attainment levels, income levels, all very positive. However, this is a double-edged sword, meaning that local and the new residents coming in as they look for jobs have higher ability to pay for housing, and it also creates more competition in the local housing market and affordability challenges for existing residents. Next, please. On top of projected population growth, jobs are also projected to continue to grow into the future with higher average earning than the region, which is also positive. Couple that with population growth, which also solidify the growing housing demand into the future. However, there are some larger employment industries, mostly service-related industries like food service, agriculture, etc. They offer lower wages right now. What it means is that these workers will face disproportionately the housing cost challenges in the local market. And if we cannot provide housing solutions or housing products appropriate to their ability to pay, that will negatively impact their ability to live and work in the region and the growth of the local economy. Next, please. And we also conducted an employer survey last fall. We have a total of 117-ish responses so far. We asked local employers, a lot of them are local employers or have presence in Scott County, in terms of housing and what it means for their workforce, retention, recruitment. Most people who responded believe there is insufficient housing in the region and there is a housing issue. And some of them even have job offers decline in the past because of housing-related issues reported by their future or new hires.
Can we ask questions during? I was just going to ask, do
Yeah.
you have the data on amount of employees per employer that responded to your survey regarding this? I'd be curious. I haven't had time to read 120 pages yet.
Yes, I believe that data exists. We'll need to go back and look at the raw
Okay.
data in order to give you an
Okay.
answer.
These were many of the larger employers.
Yeah. We asked them about, how many employers do you have, what industries. So we try to target both small, medium, and also large
Okay.
to get a better
Thank you.
representation. What it means in terms of the impact on recruitment, retention, they said that most of these housing-related issues disproportionately impact low-level, entry-level employees. Also, right now, a lot of them do not provide housing-related support. If any support is usually referring to real estate agent, listing websites. However, they do show support for some kind of public-private partnership to solve this housing issue. Now, they don't believe it's their own within their own ability to solve this problem, but they support some kind of partnership, say with the city or the county, to provide financial support for workforce. And also, most of them anticipate they will continue to hire new workers in the next 2 to 3 years, most of them still lower entry-level people, meaning that these housing issues that the local workforce face will continue in the next 2 to 3 years. They also mentioned other barriers beyond housing that limit local hiring, retention, such as salary levels, transportation, childcare, workforce shortage in certain fields like education. All of these actually goes hand in hand in housing. Next, please. Now, we have looked at in terms of demographics, jobs. Let's look at in terms of our local housing profile and our local housing market conditions. What does it look like today? Scott County mostly is dominated by single-family homes, not a lot of other housing types. However, what is positive is that there have been more new housing built since 2000 than in the region, meaning that there are more new development interest, housing development interest in our city and county than in the region. Also, there are faster growth in higher density housing types such as multifamily. This is all positive in order to add more diversity to our housing options, and the city and county need to continue to support and increase these diverse housing types. However, housing growth has in general fallen behind our population gains in the past decade. Right now, coupled with very low and also going down vacancy, meaning that even though there are housing, not a lot of them are vacant available, that also speaks to the need to continue to increase housing supply in addition to increasing the housing options available. On top of that, there's also a mismatch between household size and the bedroom in terms of what's available and what people are really looking for. Right now, the demographic trends are really telling us household size are getting smaller. However, we don't have a lot of smaller size units. And that is one thing that the city and county maybe should look into in terms of encouraging more of that housing type from a policy or regulatory standpoint. That has many benefits in terms of lowering housing costs because small size homes tend to be more affordable, and also increasing housing options for people such as seniors. If they wish to downsize, they want smaller units, etc. Another trend is that there is rising seasonal recreational housing uses, meaning short-term rentals such as Airbnb. And what it means for us is that the city and county needs to continue to monitor this trend and see what its impact on the local housing stock. Another important trend to note is that the highest value rental and ownership homes have grown faster than in a state and region. What it means for us is that as population, jobs continue to grow, if there is no intervention from the public side, the market will continue to build to the highest threshold of the market of the demand, meaning if there are more people willing to pay, they are going to build towards that. So we need to keep affordability in mind and intervene with more housing policy affordability strategies. Next, please. Right now, however, the market is still delivering mostly single-family homes, even though there are increasingly more higher density housing products delivered, such as apartments. On top of that, the new homes built are becoming bigger and more expensive. So even if the market is delivering, what they are building right now are not necessarily what people can afford. If we look at new homes built or recent home sales after COVID, many of them are still out of reach for people. They're usually between 200, 300K in price, 2,000, 3,000 square feet. That really speaks to the need to increase our strategies for affordability, especially for the lowest income population in our city and county. Right now, the rental market, and especially the apartment market, is extremely tight, meaning that very limited options or supply, but there is increasing demand. That has really pushed the rent growth since 2021. What it means for us is that there is still market opportunity right now to build more of multifamily housing because the market is so tight. That is because if there is demand, there is always supply or developers willing to fill that demand. And for us as a city and county, we need to continue to support that and also get in the game to increase more higher density multifamily. Next, please. Now, after all that data, what it means in terms of housing needs. How many people need housing from, or what kind of needs are there from a price perspective, affordability perspective? We have talked about this during the past presentations. Usually, this typically means there is a mismatch between people's ability to pay and the current housing prices. You see shortages on the both lowest end and the highest end of the income for both ownership homes and rental units. However, our policy focus should be households earning less, at or below 50% of the area median income, which is the lower income bracket. That is because even though people on a higher end of the income bracket do not pay for what they're supposed to pay, they have more options because they can pay more. However, people on the lower income brackets, they don't have a lot of options. Usually people on higher end of the income bracket take up rental units or homes, and then leave very few options for the lowest end. However, to meet that need on the lowest end of the income bracket will require very deep subsidies. That is 603 shortage of ownership unit and close to 800 rental units for people earning at or below 50% of the AMI, and that is as of today. On top of that, because of projected future population growth, there will be another 560 owner households, 250 renter households earn at or below 50% of the AMI will be added to the county by 2030 because future growth. Next, please. Now, what we talked about is how many more new units we need to build in order to meet the demand. There is another set of demand or need we need to focus on is preserving existing housing affordability. That is because, say, if I live in a house that is in poor housing condition, even if right now it's deemed as available, 5 or 10 years from now, it will probably deteriorate or become uninhabitable, and then it will basically vanish or be reduced from the available housing stock. So that's why, in addition to building more, we need to preserve existing housing affordability. And this map shows you Scott County. We actually look at all the properties in the county. The darker red, orange colors shows the property that has poor housing conditions. And you can see that most of them concentrate on the north side of the county and also within Georgetown. That speaks to the need to preserve existing housing affordability using place-based rehabilitation support for these areas. On the rental side, there's also a need to extend or renew publicly supported rental housing that have their affordability requirement expiring by 2034, and there are 6 of them. They're all within Georgetown. Next, please. Now we want to talk about special needs housing. One of the most important special needs in terms of housing needs is people experiencing homelessness. Now the graph shows you what is the official homelessness count for the county. However, this is only conducted on one night in January. That's called the point-in-time count. What we have heard through talking to service providers, local housing stakeholders, organizations, and we learn is that the actual number, based on anecdotal data and people's on-the-ground experience, is that people experiencing homelessness are much larger than this official PIT count. For example, the Amen House served over 800 individuals within 1 year, and the local school system has identified over 300 students that qualified as homeless. So the takeaway is that the population experiencing homelessness are increasing, and the actual number is way larger than the official count is. And there is a need for us to create housing solutions for that and continuum of housing options, from shelters, transitional housing, permanent supported housing, to the market rate or affordable housing. Just the continuum of housing options for people in different levels of their stage, different stages and levels of their life. Next, please. Now, we also want to talk about this community survey that we conducted. It was conducted also last fall, and we got around 1,800 responses, very thanks to city staff's efforts. That is really great turnout. 72% of the responses are homeowners, so that is one thing to keep in mind, that most people who responded to this survey are actually homeowners. So many of the things they convey or express in this survey not likely capturing the whole picture. So that's one thing to keep in mind. We asked them, what do you think about housing affordability? Most people believe there is affordable housing issue in the region, and renters think, proportionally more renters think so. So renters feel affordable housing or housing affordability issues more than homeowners. Around half of them have also experienced housing affordability issues personally, and more so among renters. They have to either make more money, accept less desirable housing, or share costs with other people. Around 60% are willing to pay no more than $1,500 per month on housing, and renters are more cost sensitive. We asked them, what do you think are the major issues in terms of housing in the region? The most highly rated one is rising rent levels, and then lack of housing within the price ranges they look for, limited rental housing options, and additionally, one thing to know is that renters face additional challenges such as housing condition issues, difficulty accessing home ownership. When asked about if we were to build more housing, what type of housing would you support? Most people support senior housing, retirement homes, homeless housing programs, and then single-family house. However, renters show more support for more diverse housing types and higher density housing, such as manufactured homes or multifamily apartments. Around 78% of the people, when asked about how do you understand affordable housing, actually understand it quite correctly. Like, affordability is a relative term. It's not really public housing or subsidized housing. It's relative to your income level. So it's positive that most people surveyed, at least, have a very correct and scientific understanding of affordable housing. So that is a really good starting off point, because we don't see that very often in our communities. A lot of people have misunderstanding of what housing affordability means. Only 22% associated with public housing or Section 8 or subsidized housing. So in terms of income demographics, some earn above 100K, a quarter earn 50K or less. Most of them are aged between 35, 54, prime working age adults. But again, we need to keep in mind that a lot of these people who responded are actually homeowners. So they have already sort of solved their housing affordability issues in the past because they own homes right now. And a lot of the voices, maybe from renters or renters that want to enter into homeownership, may not have been fully reflected into the survey in terms of especially, say, support for new housing types. Next, please. After all these surveys, data, it all boils down to this one pager. And this is the most important takeaways. What does it mean in terms of our housing needs? If you forget everything else and only remember one thing from today, the only one thing you should remember is that the city and county must create organizational capacity to facilitate housing expansion. We need more housing. We need more housing types. And therefore, we need to increase our capacity to do so through public, private, nonprofit, etc. In terms of the new housing we build, who should we target? There are several groups that are more challenged: active adults, retirees, younger people, families wanting to access homeownership, smaller households because of demographic shifts, and then also households earning at or below 80% of the AMI. We need to do so, create new housing through mixed income strategies and also at different density levels. We also need to create more housing options, housing types, especially missing middle housing, to meet diverse and changing needs. What is missing middle housing? They are usually of a density between single family and higher density multifamily. So they can blend really well into existing communities, such as existing single-family home communities, but they add a little bit of density, such as duplex, triplex, townhomes. That's a very good strategy to add new housing stock and also add the diversity and options to your local housing stock. We also need to expand homeless housing options because of, like, we see the trend of rising people experiencing homelessness in smaller scale facilities. We also need to on top of creating new housing, preserve what we have today, existing housing stock and affordability using a neighborhood-based revitalization, targeting those neighborhoods, especially with aging and declining housing stock. On top of that, also outer trains to monitor short-term rentals, how short-term rentals, what kind of impact it have on our long-term rental stock, and also to increase monitoring inspection of our long-term rental supply. Similarly, or relate to that point, also need to monitor this rising trend of regional national housing investors. That's not really a new concept, and it has been happening nationwide, especially since the COVID boom. How or whether they impact our local housing stock, especially those naturally occurring affordable. And with that, I will turn it to Russ to talk about strategies.
Oh, thank you, Summer. Good job. It's probably a good time to stop and take a breath. You've heard a lot. That's half the presentation. In most cases, a housing need analysis stops right here with a little bit of references to future actions or strategies. It's usually not weighted that way. In this case, you all asked for something more than just a statistical analysis. You wanted some direction, you want some feedback as to what you're doing well, where your needs are, and then how do we move forward as a community. So we're going to give you that. But does anyone have any points of clarification or questions? If you don't, we will move into that next step.
Well, I've got a couple, just relatively minor things. In the report, on page 18, under the section, I think it's section 11, future housing needs and current zoning is the title of that one. There's several references to US Route 75.
Yeah.
And are you talking about Interstate 75?
That needs to be corrected, yes.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know, because 25 isn't that far from there, so I just wanted to get that clarified. And then one other thing, it says, according to the latest LEHD data, for those who live and work in Scott County, their jobs are mostly in and around Georgetown. And there's 3 geographic areas mentioned. The northeast side, which is obviously Toyota. Yep. Then it says the south side of the county and the southwest side of the county. And I spent the last few days trying to think what, and I may have my directions mixed up, but what industries are there that have a lot of jobs in the south end of the county and the southwest side of the county? Do you guys know?
Well, without looking at the data, do you have any?
It's Georgetown Industrial Parks.
Okay.
It's adding International Crankshaft, Blue Tech, and I'm sure the Southwest is probably going to be the school promotion.
So are we talking only industrial, or are we talking about everything?
This is the clustering of all employers.
Yeah, well,
where they actually are on the map.
Yeah, you have a medical complex, you have the hospital, you have Landmark Office Center, you have the Kroger Center. I mean, it's a pretty big hub of employment.
Okay, sounds good. It said, it referenced the county in that, so I was thinking more out toward past old friends and everything. That's what it said in the report. Okay. All right. That's it. That's everything I had.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on. Next slide. Every plan like this needs a vision. Let me give you what I propose as the vision statement. In the future, Georgetown, Scott County will be recognized as the leading community in Kentucky for its innovative and highly integrated affordable housing and homeless prevention strategies. As the community grows and expands its employment opportunities, a local partnership between government, nonprofit organizations, and private industry will work together in a coordinated fashion to respond to emerging housing needs that offer greater diversity of choices, are more affordable to more households, are located in vibrant, friendly neighborhoods, convenient to employment centers, transportation, shopping services, parks, with a strong sense of community. For those people who are homeless or have limited housing choices, a variety of new housing initiatives will offer more accessible and affordable options for temporary, transitional, and permanent housing located in safe, supportive communities. So while this is apple pie, as it should be, It sort of sets a course that is an advancement on where we are today and sort of looks for where we can have an impact and improve conditions on the ground. And I think that should be all our objective as we think about these next steps. Next slide. The plan is composed of 5 sort of strategic initiatives or elements. The first one is spearheading housing change. Now, as I alluded to when I first stepped up, you all have to sort of think about what role does local government play in this. In some communities, it's very active. They are the primary initiator. They don't build every housing unit, but they have their hands in partnerships that bring people together to do that. You don't have the capacity to do that yet, but I think as Summer alluded to, you need to build some capacity to do more than what you can do today. That takes years to do, so there's no hurry to get there, but it's really dependent on what you decide the role is. So what is spearheading housing change? Well, I'm going to highlight 3 goals here that I thought were central to that. Number 1 is to create a community-based affordable housing entity to coordinate and spearhead the city, county's affordable housing initiatives. I've made a recommendation. Candace and I have sort of discussed it. She has some different feelings about that. Ultimately, you all need to sort of come to a conclusion about that, and we'll get into it a little bit later. Create a revolving land acquisition fund capitalized through a consortium of local banks, and an industrial revenue bonds would be brought to purchase land, subsidize affordable housing projects. That's the active role. This is you playing almost a developer type role, but you're handing off at the end to developers. They do what they do best. There's things that city, county government can do that they can't do. The next goal, to create procedures for obtaining land resources from the Affordable Housing Land Bank, which would be the entity I'm talking about, for new affordable housing development and rehabilitation. This is sort of responding to the notion, if we don't own anything or have anything to bring to the deal or the project, we're sort of observers, we're not active participants in that. So now, what are the actions that we recommend to get at some of these issues? Next slide. Okay, thank you. The land bank is a structure that's used across the country. There's also something called a land trust, which has a slightly different approach to affordable housing. Land banks control land. They get land from bequests. They acquire land. They take it through foreclosure when people stop paying their taxes and give up their property. So it can come in a lot of different ways, or it can be publicly owned land that's not being used. That's what's on the table as an entity that could manage this process. So in addition, you need to support the creation of new nonprofit community housing development corporations or organizations to engage with development partners to implement housing project and programs in the city, county. So these are private nonprofits that usually work in neighborhood settings. They have their own means of support, and they have their own in-house expertise on how to do this. Maybe they spend most of their time on rehabilitating housing, but that's the role that they would play, and we don't have that in any great number. Approach a consortium of local banking institutions to capitalize a $5 million revolving land acquisition fund to support affordable housing. It's an idea that's being implemented down at Transylvania University with their affordable housing project. Their consortium is putting up $3 million. They will basically acquire land and make it available to developers. Developers will pay them back over time. Help to put the ball in motion. Set eligibility criteria for seeking land disposition or acquisition for future affordable housing developments and rehab. So as the land bank becomes more prominent and has a supply of land to be used towards these projects, you need some criteria in which to, for people to come and seek that land for use on these projects. And then you need to request development proposals from pre-qualified development organizations interested in building or rehabilitating affordable housing. You all have not used community development block grants recently in ways of revitalizing neighborhoods, but those efforts would be built around grant funds for rehabilitation and planning for the future with neighborhood residents. And some of the neighborhoods that we highlighted north of the county probably could use those services. Next. The next sort of strategic element is protecting existing housing supply and revitalizing neighborhoods. This is speaking to that point. In order for you to sort of set out on a track, you don't come in and just start changing neighborhoods without input from community citizens. So we're recommending that a series of small area plans that could be done through your own planning department or consultants would be brought in to work with neighborhood residents, come up with a suitable revitalization strategy, identify homes that need to be rehabilitated, and then go through the process of seeking funds to do that. Your goal is to try to preserve those areas. If they go too far into decline, then you have other issues you got to deal with that are more serious and maybe at some point can't be fixed. And then to identify infrastructure improvement needs in targeted neighborhoods that support future revitalization efforts. This is often a common condition in neighborhoods that have not received any investment over years. They lack the infrastructure, they lack the housing conditions to attract people to live there. Now, in terms of actions, I think it's sort of looking at place-based analysis to determine which neighborhoods have the greatest needs and would benefit the most. So you have to sort of do on-the-ground analysis to see where those are. Seek funding to complete at least one small area plan a year or every other year. Identify strategic revitalization initiatives to rehabilitate housing, develop new affordable housing, assemble land. All these things are probably, parts of plans that would be developed. And then you got to outreach to key development partners to plan future revitalization initiatives. So this is sort of building a web of contacts that, might start with Candace, sort of meeting all these folks and knowing what the capabilities are, and then building upon that in the future. But having a network of folks that are interested in these issues is important. Next. Creating new affordable housing initiatives. This is sort of at the leading edge of the spear here. Now you're sort of out there, you're pulling together the resources that you know exist in your community, and you're going to get other expertise that maybe you don't have in-house or in the community, and you're seeking their help in building some of the areas that are a gap in your plan. This first goal sort of references this missing middle housing that Summer alluded to. Everything that happens between single-family homes to larger apartment buildings, there's something that people don't build much of anymore. It's duplexes. The owner lives on site and rents the unit adjacent to him to a renter. Triplexes, quadruplexes. These are sort of older housing types, but they fit a need that no longer gets met anymore. And if your strategy is to make housing affordable by building single-family homes, not really effective strategy. Number one, either you have to reduce the footprint of the building to make it smaller and cheaper, or you have to just build it cheaper or get free land to help start that. Those aren't all very good options because you end up with a housing stock that doesn't hold up over time. You partner with the Housing Authority, developers, Kentucky Housing Corporation on what's called low-income housing tax credit projects. This is the #1 method for funding affordable housing in the country. Several 100,000 units have come online this way. It's not public subsidy. It is the IRS allowing, through tax law, for private investors to invest in affordable housing so they can take a tax write-off. So who cares how it comes to us, but they invest in the project. So it's private money going into these projects. Developers take it with the condition that you're going to create so many units within your overall development for people at certain income levels. Their houses are built the same way as everyone else's houses. No one knows who lives in what, but it all gets done, and it's relatively seamless. Now, if you do the land bank, or even if you do the land trust, at some point you need to have land that you control. So is there a source of surplus publicly owned land that's available that we're just not aware of, either at the county or the city level, that could be used for this purpose? If so, then you're at a good starting point. We know that people get foreclosed on, and there are not family members or others to step up and take control of those properties and either fix the home up, They are often lost through foreclosure, and they sit vacant. Sometimes they have to have the house removed to remove a threat to the public safety. That's how you start to assemble these properties. You identify potential site locations to build duplexes, triplexes. This is done through zoning identification. We met with the planning and zoning, and they generally agree that this is something that could easily fit within a neighborhood context and not be disruptive. These are not big buildings. They fit within the scale of a normal neighborhood. All these are sort of cooperative ventures, especially when you get into the use of the tax credits. You need to meet a certain criteria. You work with the state because states allocate tax credit. It's on a competitive basis. So realize that there's no guarantees that you would be successful, but in meeting with the Kentucky Housing Corporation, they acknowledge that there's been no tax credit projects approved in this area in 18 years. And they're kind of surprised that that has happened. And we're wondering if there was any interest in it. And I think you all are probably at the right project, the right location might produce some positive results. There's also in 2025, state lawmakers agreed to use industrial revenue bonds to provide project funding support for affordable housing. It's the first time that's ever been done. It is a unique approach, and it sort of is a tax-exempt form of financing that would be made available for developers who are interested in meeting larger multifamily project needs. So we've identified potentially a downtown location for that. Maybe it's a senior project, but these are all details that would have to be sorted out. And then you need a mechanism for picking the developer that's best suited for your community, working with them to help develop a proposal that it would basically you would stand behind and support. So lots of planning goes into that. That's a higher level sort of need that we're seeing as down the road. Building capacity and developing new partnerships. We're going to talk in a few moments about where the low-hanging fruit is. This is where the low-hanging fruit is. Just talking to people and saying, this is what our community wants. We think that you might be able to help. We like the stuff that you're doing with, say, for example, the conversations with Habitat for Humanity. We know what they do. They have a mission. They have a model that they follow. We would like to see them do more. And if we can help them do more, then I think that's the sort of partnership you want to develop. And that goes for any number of other organizations that either would be directly involved in affordable housing or housing of the type that we're talking about, or they would provide services to people who would benefit from this. And then using your sort of focus on this issue to bring others into the conversation. Community development corporations, for example, the city of Greenville, South Carolina, if you've ever been to Greenville, it's a marvelous small city. And they built all their revitalization efforts in neighborhoods based on the CDC model. They actually created them. They incentivized them, they gave them financial support. So each major neighborhood that needed their services were created by the city. They eventually had to sort of get on their own feet. The ones that did not survive, but enough of them did to have an impact. So that's been a great example, and now they're allotted for their fine neighborhoods downtown and around the core. Next. Next. All right, thank you. To create a new homeless housing facility to meet the shelter and support service needs of homeless residents, and to explore partnerships with local business leaders on housing incentives for workforce recruitment. I think that what this comes down to is sort of being able to bring your talents and your sort of initiatives to others who may not see the opportunity. Developers, traditional developers, tend to build to the top of the market. So they're meeting the needs of people who are at the highest income levels and can pay the greatest rent. They're not really paying a lot of attention below that. So how do we get their attention? By bringing initiatives to them that they can support and have some impact. And I think sometimes you just have to show them how to do it, or go get someone outside the community that's done it before and sort of bring their expertise to the table. We see Habitat playing a potential role as maybe in the home renovation part of this. They do that in other communities. They tend to be focused more on new housing development, but I guess the question could be posed to them. Are they interested in doing that? We understand next year might be when we are able to tap some funding for the new homeless shelter. So it looks like that is moving forward on a track for success. And then how do we work with employers? They had an interest in this topic. I don't think they all knew at a high level how much of an issue it was. The ones that had experiences said, yes, we've encountered that. Others said, we generally hear in the popular press that there's an issue, but it doesn't really affect us the same way as you may think. So I think bringing them some opportunities to be part of this makes sense, and I think they might be receptive to it. Finally, housing policies, code changes, and community education. This comes down to zoning and planning issues and making housing available that's missing now possible through zoning changes. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but right now there's not the open door for people to walk in and say, okay, I want to do this type of housing, because it's not explicitly stated as authorized. Consider adopting new owner policies to ensure that short-term rental properties are run professionally. This is not a big issue in your community right now. There's about 133 known properties that are being rented. The issue becomes is if that number expands, then you need to be able to evaluate whether or not it's impacting existing neighborhoods, because it takes oftentimes an existing long-term rental off the market, turns it to a short-term rental. You can never use that again, because it's going to throw off 3 or 4 times the same revenue in a weekend than it does over several weeks. So there's no incentive for them, and it can change. Now, the other issue is, how do we manage that? How do we monitor it? Do we do inspections to make sure that these are safe? And do we inspect the long-term rentals? I mean, we really haven't been paying much attention, and most communities don't, but that's what's before you. And these are the actions that really sort of get at those. And I think, there's a lot that being done here in the early years without a lot of expense. Obviously, zoning is of interest to everyone, and people will come out and speak in for and against. But it's something that you can take on and start to get at with your community. I think starting a dialogue with the community, as Summer alluded to, they know what affordable housing is. 71% said it's price-appropriate housing for people at all income levels, and it's people not spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And then a couple other people said, okay, it's public housing, Section 8. It's that too, I guess, on some level. That's not most of what we're talking about here. Here's the low-hanging fruit. And you've heard some of these, but most of those are sort of bigger picture and harder to implement. But these are the ones that you could start tomorrow and start having success doing. It's really sort of outreach. It's doing more research. It's preparing yourself for the future. It's getting an answer to the question of what's the implementing organization that we need to follow. You've got several examples in the plan that you can look at. You may need to talk to some additional people in other communities that have had success. The Housing Authority is primed to renovate the entire supply over the next few years, unless something derails them. But that's 328 units, and they're looking at opportunities to expand on their properties by right. So they're going to move ahead regardless of what we decide today. They would benefit, because they told me that, look, if we had more land, we would consider doing one of these low-income housing tax credit projects. Finally, I think how you interact with the community and the people who are engaged in these issues day in and day out, I think is sort of really the focus of your next steps. We are in a situation where funding is very uncertain right now. The future of HUD is uncertain, so we don't really know how all this shakes out. We need to monitor that. The Housing Authority obviously is monitoring it because they're dependent in many ways on those funds. So working with them would be helpful. And then sort of building your capacity to create partnerships. And the housing suggestions that we made for you, I think, are pretty straightforward in terms of who would be the target audience or the population we try to serve, what type of housing do we think they need, and then you need to decide what level will you play in terms of making that happen. So lots of discussion needs to occur going forward, but it's not tens of millions of dollars to start this process. It's much less than that.
Okay, if you have questions, this is where we're going to work with this. If you're in the audience, we ask you to stand up so the mics over here can pick you up. Council, if you have questions, I'll pass you the mic. And same thing up here, if you have questions, your mics might be on anyway, but, so, if you have questions, let's do that, okay? Any questions here from council? Or comments? All right. You got a question?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And thank you for all your hard work. This is a really great report, and we appreciate you coming in. All your hard work, and plus you came in from Alexandria, Virginia, right?
Right.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. So new construction is so expensive nowadays, of course, not just here, but across the country. And I read a report today, a 2023 report that from the National Association of Home Builders, that the net profit for a builder on a single-family home is only 8%. So they're not making a ton per home. A lot of people think they're making a lot more, but it seems like they're just making about 8% according to that report. We're here lately, we've been annexing property, doing some rezoning in order to create more new construction. And we're seeing more and more townhomes and apartments in these proposed plans. When we talk about affordable housing with new construction, just briefly, I ran some numbers. There is a townhome, a brand new townhome in Georgetown over in Falls Creek, and it's priced at $309,000. And if you, basically, if you wanted to buy it, if you were a homeowner interested in buying it, and you got a 6.5% rate from Joe to purchase the property, and if you did FHA, I think you'd need about $24,000 for this townhome to bring to closing, and then your payments, what I worked out to be, would be $26 a month, and that's for a townhouse. Now, granted, it's a new townhome. That also affects the rental rates too for people, because if an investor bought that property, or if the developer was keeping that property and keeping 20% equity in it and probably paying about 1% more, maybe 7.5%, then their monthly payment would be $2,200. So if they want to factor in profit, to that as well, they're going to charge a few hundred more per that. With new construction, is there really much that can be done to help incentivize that, for buyers and people that want to rent? What's been your experience with that?
Well, I mean, it's you sort of encapsulated the issue, and it is solved by the developer by building to a higher end of the market, so the margin's not 8% anymore, it's 15%, and because now he's getting $500,000 for the house. And that's where his comfort zone is. So he's not really looking at the price point that you want him to build at because it's too risky for him. Now, could you work with that developer and say, look, we're going to solve your land issue up front. We have a piece of land that's right where you want it to be, and maybe we have to bring some utilities to it, but we're willing to do that for that to be delivered to the market for something more affordable than 305 or whatever you
Yeah.
quoted.
Well, definitely, and there are markets for that. Right now, boomers own about 37% of the property in Georgetown, and they're not really wanting to move. They're not very excited about that, but there are some options for them, really nice townhomes that are maybe even in that price range, but they typically want, when they do want a townhome, they want their primary bedroom on the first floor, especially if they're older. And then a lot of the townhomes that are in these proposed plans are smaller, not a lot of yard, if any. So from an affordability standpoint, first-time home buyers just don't seem to be chomping at the bit to, purchase or really even rent these newer construction type.
They've been through the
developments.
ringer. They
Yeah.
have been through the ringer, and they're about giving up right now or taking a pause. And so aren't owners who have taken their houses off the market in droves in recent months because they're sick of waiting and hoping that they're going to get the price they always thought they were going to get. And they're not going to get that. And it takes them months to figure out that, all right, we have to discount to move this thing, or otherwise we're going to stay here longer than we would need to.
Great.
So probably now, the market now is not a good indicator of where we're going to be in the future. We're going to have to bust out of this over time. But we want to get to the other side with a set of strategies that we can implement that make sense, that will produce some affordability. But I think, generally speaking, the missing middle piece that we talk about, which would include townhomes, is sort of starting to get you there. You don't really get to affordability until you bring in some more density. And that's dozens of units at a time. And that's a larger apartment buildings. Now, where you do that, it's not going to be in every neighborhood. It's going to be in sort of along the interstate. It's going to be places where people need to get to and from work real conveniently. And, you don't need a million of those. You just need strategically placed where you have a couple hundred units here, a couple hundred units there. It's sort of sucking up the demand. But you're not going to get a lot of affordability through smaller increments, single-family homes. It just doesn't happen unless you're really cutting corners on the cost of those.
All right, thank you.
I think Candace is just item number 3, actions and expectations. Okay, moving forward. And again, if you have questions.
Mayor, I just want to make a comment real quick. I was interested in this when we started, and in 1999, Nicole and I purchased our first home in Bradford Place. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or actually, 2-bath, single-car garage directly behind the library. Everybody knows where that is. In 99, we paid $87,500. I'm aging myself here now. Right now, that market, or that home on Zillow, off market, is $265,000, from $67 a square foot to over $200 a square foot. Setting aside land as a county or a city, are 2 biggest things we get pushback on. One is property taxes, which, if anyone pays attention, Georgetown and Scott County have some of the lowest property taxes in the state of Kentucky, in the bottom 10, bottom 5 for the county. Bottom 6 for the county. The second thing is growth. And what you're discussing will drive more growth. And I don't have a problem with growth, and I know this is an area we need to fill, but when we have tax rates that are some of the lowest in the state, when you mentioned Greenville, I just quickly looked up Greenville. They're about twice our population. But they also are in a county with 21 other cities, and the county has a $448 million budget. So when we talk about these things, we have to talk about comparable communities, size, manufacture, or job opportunities. There's not a lot of land to develop in northern Scott County. It becomes very hilly, and you have very small places, and you get maybe 5-10 acres that could be flat. but there are 5-acre plots that are selling for $160,000. And we don't have any public land that we're sitting on that could make a dent in what we're talking about. So, and then you have the private market concept. I don't want to get my finger in and start messing with the private market and the buying and selling of houses and stuff. Georgetown Housing Authority, I met with Rick Toney yesterday about some things. And, okay, so if we go to remodel 328 units, where does everybody go while we do that? I mean, we say this sounds good, but then you look at the implications and the unintended consequences, and that's where I usually start asking questions. I start with unintended consequences, is where is this going to be in 10 years? Because I don't want somebody to look back and go, man, they were idiots. I would like to leave a great legacy as an elected official on the things that we do. And there are times we make mistakes, and we try to back up and make sure that we get our mistakes corrected. But I keep looking at this, and the things that we're talking about feel so larger community oriented, who have much higher tax bases, who have greater access to land that may be developed. How many lots, residential, do we have in Scott County that are undeveloped right now, but that can be? Do you know? Whether it's multifamily, whether it's anything. Does anybody know that?
If you want to stand up and that way you can pick up your mic and they can
No,
hear
no,
you.
no, no.
You might have a question? Oh, there you go.
Man, I'm just curious. It's got to be over 1,000, probably. Maybe even more than that.
I don't know why I stood up here. Not a lot of info that I have off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But we do have parcel data that,
Okay.
and ostensibly each of those parcels has a development right associated with them. And we do know the total number of units in Scott County. So that's something we can work on.
Okay.
Unless you have it.
No, you do
It's just, there are a lot of big ideas that we're still a town of 40-something thousand. We're still a county of 60, low 60,000s. I mean, money is not free-flowing around here.
Well, you raise a great question, which speaks to the level of involvement that you think is appropriate for this community. What's your gut telling you? What role should you all play in this process? You've heard where the needs are and what the potential solutions are. It sounds like you're saying, okay, some of that stuff may be beyond our ability to impact. Let's let others handle that.
But what is the low-hanging fruit?
Well, it's sort of the organizational aspects of this. It's the creating the cooperative partnerships, the people who actually are going to be responsible for delivering product to the market. You need to know who they are. You need to know what their needs are. If you can fill the needs, fine. If you can't, then maybe those opportunities don't get to fruition.
I would say our largest developer in Georgetown is building all the apartments and most of the single-family homes.
Yep.
It's one.
No. Regarding Greenville, you got to realize that they've been at this for, I believe, 50 years. They were old mill town, and they're not a mill town anymore. They got remnants of it, but that's not their image anymore. They sort of built it up.
All right.
I'd like to make a comment. You know, this is a real personal issue for all of us. We have loved ones that want to be able to have a place to call home, and we want our young people who are graduating from our high schools to be able to have opportunities here. And I think it is our duty, and I think we're going through the process. It takes time.
Yep.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And this is an elephant.
This is.
And it's real. The aspect that I would like to look at and explore, and I think this is what you're laying out, is the public-private partnership with local financial institutions, and we look at, but what David is talking about is finding the parcel that fits that piece. And I think we have to look and we have to explore those options. I don't disagree with anything David said, but I think the model that was used with Transylvania University and that partnership with local financial institutions, banks, and that consortium to make an effort to try to address it. I think that's for us is a piece of low-hanging fruit. I think we're starting this process, and it's one step at a time,
Right.
and it will take time. But I'll go back. We want our children, our grandchildren, to have opportunities to live here, and like right now, my middle son, he's a professional, works here in town. He couldn't afford to buy a home right now, and he makes a good living, more than I did when I started out teaching years and years ago. So I think we're doing the right thing by trying to set the table and look at where we're at now, and then looking at projects that have worked in other areas that are similar to us. And I think it'll take a little bit more work, but I think we're doing the right thing by starting the conversation and starting the process of looking at it. But I will say that I don't want to jump into anything. I don't want to make rash decisions or recommendations, but time is of the essence, because people are struggling today, and it's not going to change overnight. And we're blessed with so many opportunities here, but this is one of our challenges. And this is not unique to Georgetown.
No, it isn't.
This is commonplace across a lot of similar-sized communities and larger communities throughout the United States. So I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate the report, but I think it is going to take a lot of work to move forward. But we have to work together and collaboratively to make a difference.
Also, another way to think about this is that you all are reflecting on your own experiences and your own knowledge of the local area in the context of the United States, even the Midwest, Mid-Atlantic. This is a desirable community in a low-cost part of the country. You don't agree with that, but they're looking in a national context, where do we find opportunities that don't exist in other metro areas? And although you're a smaller metro area, you're a desirable location. And I guess the question would be, those people are probably prospecting your markets now, looking for those opportunities because they see you as desirable, growing jobs, educated workers. Not a lot of communities can tick those boxes. So 15 to 19% of all properties, residential properties, are being bought up by investors, small investors and institutional investors. Quite frankly, if they were out of that business, we probably would all be in a better spot right now. We wouldn't be gnawing and fighting for every house out there. But my guess is that they probably have looked at Georgetown and Scott County and looking for those best buy opportunities. You don't have as many as other places do, but they're going to look. Yes.
So yeah, you're exactly the question I was going to ask. Part of your presentation and what you're talking about now. I'm in the home loan business here in this town, and had a couple from Texas that made an offer on a house, signed a contract, never saw the house, but they were looking at a map and they were looking at affordability, and it fell through because of a home inspection, but they were going to buy it
Right.
if everything went through.
Were they buying it as investors, or are they going to move here?
No, they were buying as investors. They both had great jobs, and just getting on Zillow, looking around the country, like, where are good places to buy property that look reasonable to rent? Why, is beyond me.
There's very sophisticated websites
But-
and services that help them do that.
To the point of, like, there are a lot of corporations, and they were forming an LLC, and I talked to them on the phone, and they were looking at 2 or 3 other places as well. But how would you stop that in a community? Like, because that's not, I'd love to see somebody from Georgetown buy that house and not somebody from Texas to rent it. But I don't know how you can legally.
Well, it's very hard. I don't know that you could stop it. That's why our recommendation is monitor that activity. And that
What
is-
does that mean?
That means know when LLC has purchased a property and converted it to a rental, because chances are it could be an investor. And then if you're starting with 133 properties today and you end up 3 years from now at 500 properties, your community is changing whether you're paying attention to it or not. And that's important to know.
No, I agree. It's important
'Cause you
to know,
could-
but I don't know if you can.
could-
Monitoring doesn't mean you can control it.
No, but you could inspect those properties. You could require registration of those properties so you know where they are. You can start to manage them in a better way than perhaps we're doing now. There's no need to manage them right now. They're a fairly small impact.
Well, and it's hard for homeowners as well because they're putting a price out there that people here locally may think, well, that's too much.
Right.
And somebody out of town, so you don't want to hurt the homeowner either from being able to sell their properties. So it's
It's a
complicated.
double-edged sword,
So along those same lines, your all's report indicates that 73% of our homes are owner occupied in Scott County. 73%.
Right.
How does that compare to similar sized communities across the Southeast United States?
Nationally, we'll start nationally. Ownership rates were in the high 60s. Now they're getting in the low 60s. With all the upheaval since the Great Recession and COVID sort of shook things out differently. So you guys are operating at a much higher level than the national average. My guess is that in communities like yours, probably very similar. There's not a lot of housing choices. In other words, most housing options are single-family homes. Most are owned. But as soon as you get into more metropolitan, larger areas, then there's a more diversity expectation that you're going to have apartments, and you're going to have townhomes and other things in addition to single-family homes. So,
But would you agree that if we don't have more supply to meet the demand, that costs are only going to exponentially go up or
Yes.
continue to go up?
yes.
So we have to find some type of balance, and I think that's part of our challenge as well. But I'll go back to saying we are blessed with the opportunities here in our community, and this is one of the challenges that we need to collectively and collaboratively navigate. And I think we've got some direction. Now we just need to decide our next steps and how to navigate forward together.
You don't have to
And-
get everything right the first time. You can course correct when you need to if you think that things are producing the results you don't want. If you're smart about it, you can do all these things. And you don't have to bite off the whole elephant in the first bite. Again, that's something that's very gradual and incremental over time.
I know Dan, you got a question. If you can hold off for just a minute here. I want to get Candace up here for item number 3 so we can move that. Then we'll have a session time where we have council comments and also from the fiscal court, any other question that needs to be answered. So I'm going to let Candace come up here and do the action and expectations moving forward. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah. I think this is probably the most important part of the meeting, right, is what do we do now? We have this document, and I have, in my research, also seen cities who did these type of projects, and then it was set on a bookshelf and collected dust. So our goal is to not let that happen, and I'm personally determined to put this document into action with the help of all of you, of course. One person cannot create change, but we have to make progress together with the support of elected officials and the public as a whole. I know that affordable housing and homelessness can be highly politicized, and there can be strong opinions on what it should or should not look like. In my time working with unhoused individuals for over 12 years, I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions on how we serve or don't serve those folks. But I think Georgetown, Scott County has shown that we can overcome this unfortunate, normal part of the process and find ways to move forward together. We have shown that we can put aside our individual preferences to prioritize the community as a whole, not to say that there are not moments that we disagree or feel like it's challenging to get through, but I think that we all want to serve our community better. Since this office has been established, we have made more progress, I would say, in the homeless prevention side of the office. We have secured 2 federal grants, the Emergency Solutions Grant and the Tenant-Based Rental Assistance Funding. This funding in our community would not be here without this office's ability to capture those and to maintain them. These funds have made it possible for the low barrier shelter to expand and to meet more needs of the unhoused individuals in our community. And that's great for a lot of reasons, one being the relief that it gives to our community services and first responders. The funding has moved many clients from being chronically homeless into housing and in positions where they can be contributing members of society again. And barriers that have been lingering over them for years were able to be lifted with federal dollars and the support that comes with that. The 6 digits worth of funding that we have brought in will only grow and open more doors for services like that. Now that we have this housing needs assessment finalized, the focus on affordable housing can increase. With goals and actions and the deliverables that you've just seen, we can strategically move forward. For my office, I plan to prioritize a few of the items on all of the slides that you just saw. I know that was a lot to take in. I've based these priorities on what I know about Georgetown, but observations since coming into this office, conversations with pretty much everyone in this room, and tools that we have ready to help accomplish these tasks. Under the first goal, I've been doing a lot of research on community land trust projects, and I have seen a couple here in the state that have worked really well. I heard one of the founding members of the Berry Project in Louisville speak at a conference last year, and so I'm interested to explore what that could look like here in our community, and if that's a possibility, one way that we can work towards affordable housing. Under the second goal, protecting existing housing supply, my office has always monitoring market changes in rental housing and real estate. These data trends highly affect everything that goes on in my office. Under goal 3, creating new affordable housing initiatives, the office is currently ongoing monitoring for opportunities to utilize public-owned land parcels to attract high-quality mixed income and affordable housing developments. These projects have a lot of moving parts and are therefore not an easy item to achieve, but with an office that you all have created to focus on these type projects, they're much more attainable than if it didn't exist. So already developers have reached out to discuss possible projects with our communities, and so with this assessment, we're able to tell them what we really need in the focus areas, such as the smaller units, the 1-bedrooms, and then housing for elderly folks who are aging in place are big needs that we have, and we know that and can try to focus on that. Also under that goal item, many things over at the Housing Authority, we would like them to do all those renovations and have a lot of growth. And there already has been a lot of renovations that were started by Bryn Jones, the previous director, and then the current director, Rick Toney, has a lot of great plans moving forward on how they can expand. And so while we can't make that happen for them, as the city and county, supporting them in whatever ways that we can to help them make those goals happen. Under goal 4, building capacity and creating new partnerships, there are a few items that my office has already been working on. In partnerships with many organizations, we have worked to improve the annual homeless population count. As you saw in the chart, the numbers went up, and I think that is because we have a growing population, but also because we are perfecting that count every year. Another item that he talked about that we're already working on is pursuing CDBG funds to build a new low barrier shelter. We have hit record numbers this summer at the low barrier shelter, which is something that we weren't expecting, and that Heather has been working to try to meet the needs of, but there have actually been a few days that they have actually reached capacity, which she really tries not to do, and so we really need to be able to expand the number of beds that they have there. One of the things I would also like to focus on is the long-term rentals, monitoring and tracking those. It can be really helpful for a community to monitor and track long-term rentals and improve safety and the quality of homes that we have. Since I have been in office, there has been damage done to rental units that were poorly maintained that could have been avoided. Allowing properties to degrade to unusable standards takes away from our housing stock, and we need all the housing that we can get. And often those types of rentals prey on vulnerable population. Lastly, one of my number one goals since I've been in this role is to provide education. The nuances of housing, poverty, homelessness can all be overwhelming, especially if you don't have a lot of personal experience. I've appreciated Holden Fleming and his staff as they've been prioritizing public education as well on how planning and zoning works and the ways that the community can be involved. The opportunity I had to be a part of their housing forum was exactly the type of educational opportunities that I'm looking for and hopefully that you all will be in attendance of. As individuals, it's hard to understand how the city and county as a whole operate and how we affect each other. Moving forward, there might be zone change suggestions or new ordinances offered up, and these take a lot of education and understanding to maneuver. I hope that my office can be a place where you can come and ask questions, get curious, and maybe even step out of your comfort zone. Because as comfortable as we are doing things the way that they've always been done, it will not yield different results, which is what we've been talking about today in our discussion. The community is asking for change. For one, my office exists, so we want change. And those survey results make it clear that people are struggling with housing and they would like it to be different. And so together, we need to educate ourselves on how to make smart, community-driven choices. And this housing needs assessment is a great first step. So I believe that we all have time for more questions, but also if in the future, tomorrow or next week or next month, you have questions, feel free to reach out and chat because I want to move together with you all and work forwards, not backwards. So I don't know.
Thank you. Okay, I think, Dan, you had a question. You want to stand up? You had a question?
I just had when they were talking earlier about the question of rental, of owners that live remotely but rent here, is there a way, and this is a question, to put into the deed that it's required for a certain property to be owner occupied? So that would that be a method that could work? And then I guess another comment is, as a citizen, I think the city and the county, for one, it's great to see you all working, here together. We should see more of this where you all are kind of doing joint body things together. One key part of this whole thing is real estate. Like Georgetown is basically a real estate community. We're a real estate town here on the interstates of the highways. So I would like to see, as a citizen, would like to see the city and the county. Often, I think over the years, the government has left development to the developers, and sometimes they get outplayed. So the city maybe needs to have this, strategic real estate point of view and acquire some land. So this land bank idea seems to be something that should be pursued, buy some strategic land in the city. And then in terms of the small area plans that would possibly go through the planning and zoning office that they've recommended, so one place that we should look at is over behind the cemetery expansion, which backs up to Suffaletta Park, which backs up to the Georgetown Housing Authority. And then there is 40 acres of city-owned land that at least 20 of it is not, some of it's drainage, but there's a large plot of city-owned land over by the Housing Authority, by the Suffaletta Park, and by the cemetery that we absolutely need a small area plan there. Just one thought. And thank you.
A couple things on the short-term rentals. This is an evolving state-of-the-art in terms of how communities manage these. Key West, Florida, they live off of short-term rentals. It's people are renting multi-million-dollar cottage homes. They used to, up until this year, they used to let people just rent them by the week. And of course, that results in a lot of turnover, people coming in the community, leaving in a week, or get another rental. This year, they said, we're not going to allow that anymore. If you're not prepared to rent the property for a month, 30 days straight, you don't rent it at all. So, these places are bringing in 10 grand a week. You got to pony up for $40,000 a month. And that's going to weed out some people. And it's going to cut the circulation and the turnover down. So there are things you can do. I don't know, you could say you can't rent it on a short-term basis. You may control what that means. And if someone's going to rent that unit they bought on a permanent basis, they're getting a fraction of what they could do on a short-term basis. So that's that's where the incentive comes into play. They don't want to do that.
But could it be written into a deed that a property has to be owner occupied? Is that a legal?
I don't believe that would be legal. You can't stop how they can use it. You can manage how they use their property. I don't think you could say you can't rent it. Now, if you're in a subdivision owned by a developer and they write those into the bylaws, so everyone who buys into that development knows they can't rent it, that's different. People agreeing up front. This is not the case. These are just homes that are out there on the market and being purchased.
Okay, any other questions from the council here or comments? Okay? Stellar.
Candace, if you don't mind, I appreciate you kind of got down to the lower level that I've been thinking about is homelessness. They have names and faces. Those are people in our community, right, that are homeless. And so you mentioned that you're already, and which is really, I was really glad to hear this. I just was wondering if you could expound on a little bit. You said you've already helping certain individuals kind of walk away from homelessness. What's that look like? I mean, like, what are you helping them get into? Here's what I'm driving at. I'm aware of Elizabeth Village, and they're helping folks. And I'm aware of the Gathering Place, and they're helping folks. And it sounds like through your office, you're helping some folks. I mean, that's basically why we're here, homeless folks. And so, and helping them stay, if we can give them that leg up, it sounds like you're doing, that's why I wanted you to expound on it, helping them stay there and improving and moving on, living their life, right? Apart from homelessness. That's what we're really here for. So I was just wondering if you could expound on how you're helping these folks now with the funds that you've been able to acquire.
Yeah, so the ESG and TBRA funding, the whole goal of that is to pull people out of homelessness. And so the ESG specifically, it's Emergency Solutions Grant. It deals with rapid rehousing, I think is what you're specifically asking about. It also helps fund our low barrier shelter, but the rapid rehousing is fairly flexible for federal dollars in the grand scheme of things. But quite a few clients that we have had have just needed those move-in costs. And so they have a monthly income that could pay rent on, or they're living in a hotel and paying more than my mortgage in a hotel. But they can't save up the money to pay the security deposit, first month's rent, utility deposits. They maybe have a rental arrear, which is why they, were evicted in the first place, and they have to get all that paid in one lump sum before they can acquire their housing. The rapid rehousing funds can help eliminate that big barrier, get them into housing, and then they can either sail on their own and be able to pay their rent, or it can offer medium-term rental assistance, so pay some of their rent for 12 months or 18 months, depending on their situation, so they can kind of get their feet under them. So there's been a few clients that we have moved in that have been homeless for years, but they've had an income, just not been able to get into housing. So the Rapid Rehousing Program has been able to help with that. And then the Tenant-Based Rental Assistance Program is similar, but from where I inherited it from a past program, I just have the clients they already had on there, but they will hopefully move to where they won't need that assistance on that program, in the next year or so. So.
Well, thanks for that, because to me, the folks that we're aware of that are actually homeless, and we're aware of that population, and we're aware they're using these various facilities, and there's probably more. I know there are a number of churches doing things that I probably don't know about, but my point is this. To me, that's the low-hanging fruit. What we're discussing here is the big grand, the big grand vision, which is great. But right now, I'm glad to hear that some folks you're able to assist, and to me, that's the low-hanging stuff. And I'm wondering, I'm sure this is happening too, or I hope it is, places like Elizabeth Village, places like the Gathering Place, your office, some of the Amen House, I know that it was mentioned, I didn't read every word, but I worked on it. I noticed in one of the sections, I forget what, I think I wrote it down. I didn't write the title of the section, but you brought up sober living houses here in Scott County. In particular, they're in Georgetown. There are a number of them that I'm aware of. And here's my point. All of these folks, whatever, sober living, gathering place, are they trying to coordinate? I mean, we've got an established clientele. To me, that's the low-hanging fruit, that we can be, which I'm tickled to hear what you've said about how you're helping some folks. I understand that first month's rent and the utility deposit and all those things is tough for somebody that's on the lower end of their income level. And the other thing is folks that are homeless, they're always, something took them to that point. And are we trying to address that? I call that low-hanging fruit too. These individuals are they're in our town. They may be some of our family members. I don't know, but to me, that's the low-hanging, and that's the things we can be concentrating on. But to me, it's got to be a coordinated effort. I'll share this, and then I'm done. But I do appreciate you sharing those facts. That's very interesting to me. Back to the sober living. I noticed that it was in the report that something about overseeing and inspecting them or whatever. I don't know totally how those operate, but I will tell you this. My wife and I spend a lot of time. We know where those folks are at. We know those folks. We're just trying to help them. We do it on our own time with our own money. This is not a pat on the back. This is, and I think I probably speak for everybody in this room, or you wouldn't be sitting in this room. I think everybody here cares about those people. But it's a tough game to get involved in to helping those folks. It takes time and effort, and it's not easy. So to me, that's the low-hanging fruit. And when you're looking at like the sober living houses, those people, they are in tough spots. It's basically self-inflicted. Listen, I'm straight up with these folks, but I've been up at 5 o'clock many mornings to go take a guy to a job that he's got because they don't have a ride. So all of that stuff that's daily for those folks. And that's something, well, Judge Covington and I we've had many conversations about how we can try to help those folks. It's tough, but maybe we'll have some more, because I didn't realize that funding was able to do those kind of things, because those folks need that help. Sometimes they just need that extra little hand in the beginning. They found a job, they don't have a house, they don't have a car, but if they had a down payment, this and that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so I think you're kind of getting at is this tension that my office holds is there are people right here, right now who need help. They need homelessness prevention, they need services. And that would be great. Let's pour all of our money and effort that way. But also, if we don't look up and into the future and invest in affordable housing and look into how we kind of get creative on making it to where our community is affordable for everyone, then we're going to constantly be in this first boat where we're just constantly trying to provide assistance. Because the myth of poverty and homelessness is that it's caused by mental illness or drug abuse or divorce or domestic violence. It's caused by affordable housing. I have lots of people who are able to pay a pretty good, portion of their income to housing, but we can't find housing they can afford. There are people waiting at the gathering place. There are people waiting at Elizabeth's Village, ready to move out, but we can't find a unit for them. And so we have to work on that end too, but there's a tension, like which pot do we pour into more first, and how much do we pour in there, because they both are a priority, so it's hard.
Mayor Jenkins?
Yes, sir.
If Candace is finished, I have one additional.
Okay.
And this is Holden, help me, we, circling back to the balance that we talked about, we've met several times, Holden and I, with a group of ag stakeholders, and I would like to ask Holden, and then maybe we can talk some more, but how could we dovetail the mini clusters that have been proposed possibly, and the transfer of development rights program that we've talked about? How could this dovetail to help the affordable housing piece that we need to look at? And you know, the zoning piece, when we talk about the concern of 5-acre lots being carved off and taking up prime farmland, you know, but could you look at the possibility of a mini cluster with like 4 quadplexes being able to be zoned onto a 5-acre plot that would meet, that if it was designated for affordable housing in a range, you know, that type of creative thinking, and then the transfer of development rights, I think is something we could look at as well. That's been done in other communities, and how could that dovetail?
So I'm actually going to start by answering, unfortunately, Mr. Livingston isn't here right now, but I did find the data that he had requested as far as how many spaces do we really have left. And so I'm actually going to give credits to my senior planner, Ms. Lisa Katz, found this in our comprehensive plan. Essentially right now, within our urban service boundary, which is something else to consider, the difference between the housing needs of the city of Georgetown and the housing needs of unincorporated Scott County, and how those things dovetail together. But we currently have about 3,400 units that could be built that have not yet been built. Either that's a single-family lot that just doesn't have development taking place yet, or that is, you know, a multifamily unit that just isn't ready for construction yet. Now, one, you know, bit of context on that is that those numbers come from 2022, and so we are at this point a 3-year lag. But that again kind of, I think, begins to shape this future about where are we going to put these units. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this that context is key. And so when we talk about affordable housing and meeting the housing needs of the community, that is going to look different in the county versus going to look like in Georgetown. And so when we consider housing developments of any type within unincorporated Scott County, one of the primary things that we hear in our comp plan and when we talk to our community is maintaining that rural character. Now, traditionally, rural character has been defined as 5 acres or more. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, rural character has a lot more, there's a lot more to it than just how much land is stuck together. And so when we talk about something like a cluster development or that mini cluster, or how many units can you put on one parcel, you can do those things. You just have to make sure that you're putting up safety valves in other places to make sure that you're not, stressing out the infrastructure in the area, that you have roadways and water that can support that. But if you can do that and you can safeguard that rural character in other ways, then that is a conversation that needs to be had for the community. And that's part of the big picture. So yes, you can do it. You just have to be willing to take a look at what is character beyond just 5 acres or not. Now, how does that dovetail into the transfer of development rights? And now I'm going to look down here at this row here. You guys, the city of Georgetown, you're the urban hub. You are the urban development here in Scott County. Development should look different here in Georgetown than it does in Scott County. You heard a lot about that missing middle today. What from duplex on up to small scale apartment buildings. What Judge Coven talked about there is that transfer of development, right? If we are looking at where density is best suited, it's better suited in Georgetown than it is in unincorporated Scott County. If we're going to be building units, not again, thinking outside of our silos from the city of Georgetown to all of Scott County as a whole, when you build a house, you're not just meeting a Georgetown need or not just meeting a Scott County need. We have an interconnected economy, we have an interconnected community. So where should those units go? And maybe they shouldn't go into the far-flung regions of Scott County, where it's more difficult to access by police and fire, where it's more difficult to get the pipes and, internet fiber lines out there to service these people. And so what would that look like to transfer it from?
We got fiber everywhere now.
Did we get it across the bridge? Did we get it there?
We got to cross the railroad track in Sadieville, so
It's everywhere.
we're covered.
Several times.
Yes.
The point is, but it is something to consider. Where do we want to put these houses? Where do we want to put the units? And there's a good argument to be made that it needs to be in Georgetown, and that, as we heard from the consultants, if you try to meet all of the housing needs with only a single type of housing typology, we're not going to get there. We're not going to meet that need. And so then you got to take that next step. And again, looking at context, where can we fit these other types of housing units in, and what does that look like? And so that's where I get excited about something like that infill development, where the city takes a proactive role in identifying properties where it could make sense. We start looking at neighborhoods and say, in this situation, if we don't, if we have a vacant lot, maybe a duplex can go on there. Maybe a triplex can go on 2 lots that are next to each other. What that looks like is dependent upon us taking a look at our current regulations, seeing if they're giving us the product that we want, and if they're not, going through the public process that will get us to those products that we do want. And so I'm encouraged by the suggestions that we've received in this housing needs assessment. I'm encouraged that the county is looking at how to dovetail those needs together, and that we have a council who has at least come this far in supporting this process.
Thanks, Holden.
Did that cover everything?
I just wanted, it's something we can look at as some options.
What is our character?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Holden. Okay, there's an opportunity for comments for city council, so I got the mic here, so if you got something you want to, words or question, and, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, to echo what you were talking about earlier, and Kelly, what you were also talking about with tying ownership to property purchases. Here in Georgetown, we do have White Oak Villages, and that's a senior community, and that's 55 and over. And I believe in their homeowners association and in their deed restrictions, either 75% or 100% of the owners of the properties there have to be owner occupied. I believe that just from my rudimentary knowledge of real estate, that when you have a 55 and over community, it's easier to tie that together and to legally be able to make ownership be mandatory or close to it with those properties. So that's a pretty big deal. But the second thing, and then I'll be done, is higher density properties, especially new construction, higher density, they always seem to be geared toward rentals. That's just kind of what their nature is in general. They're not really made for ownership. And we have so many people here in the community that talk to really all of us, not just me, but all of us, about what makes Georgetown so special. A lot of people agree it's our people, but many folks also add that having a vested interest and owning property helps give you a long-term stability and helps shape the community and kind of make it what it is. I'm not 100% sure that that's all completely correct, but I know that a lot of people really feel that way. I wanted to get your, some additional opinions on that. Do you think, for example, our visitor from Virginia, what have you seen in other communities as far as opinions about what home ownership or property ownership is compared to rentals?
I think ownership is foundational to the country and has been promoted as such for decades. However, as was stated earlier, we also want to give opportunities to people who are on the outside looking in, who would like to either come back to their hometown and set down some roots, or are not ready to own a home and right now can't afford to own a home. if you don't provide those steps up the ladder, you find you have a bunch of older owner occupants without a steady supply of people to buy them out at the appropriate time. So you need to sort of almost create a population that aspires to own a home, and they can live in a rental while they're establishing themselves, and then move in that direction. And I think that's why this diversity issue is important, because, you know, I see a lot of communities that are well-founded on the principles you just shared, but they've been exclusive to everyone else who's not at that point yet. And I don't think you want to get in a position where you've left some people out that would be in that position in 10 years once they're starting to settle down and have a job that can support the purchase and ownership.
Appreciate it. That's a great answer.
Okay, anyone on the council got any questions or comments? All right, anybody up there? Is everybody spoke out and everything? Last chance, okay. All right, well, that being said, thank you all for being here, and I hope that it was a good conversation, and thank you again for the opportunity to listen to this. We have some steps. We know what we're facing, and we've got at least some action plans to figure out how we get there. The next step, I guess, now is just actually putting this together, getting the proper people at the table, and start the process. So again, thank you all for being here, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.